Jeremy used to set it up for me that it automatically did it, so I don't think of it, but.
Thank you for the
Okay,
reminder.
everyone. So just FYI, the meeting is being recorded. And I should be sharing my agenda. Are you seeing it?
Well, it's there. That's better.
Okay. So I'll just quickly list what we're doing because I'm going to take it off the share. We're going to talk about the update. Liz will take this on the request for quote. We'll debrief from last month's fantastic session on the history of the site, talk about some next steps. We wanted to talk about some possible guidelines and guidance for interpretive panels, and we thought maybe Marcia would have some guidance on this, and we wanted to talk about whether we should link this into other interpretive panels, most notably the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail interpretive panels that are going to be going up. And then we've been sort of bumping this across a couple of meetings. We wanted to see if we could discuss, just sketch some committee member ideas for the site intended as guidance and background for the design firm, public comment, and then we'll adjourn. So let me stop share. And with that, Liz, if you'd love to take it away, tell us a little bit about our update for request for quote and companies that are interested in participating.
Sure. So good news. So Places Associates and Bill Murray in particular, who's their landscape designer, who had been working on the site, doing the flagging of the trees and the plans that you've seen. So they have accepted the proposal, and the CHDC voted it last night. So they are set to go in June. They're going to start.
That's amazing. So I forgot to ask if someone can take minutes. I can if no one else wants to.
Oh, I am typing away madly here. If there's another volunteer, I wouldn't say no, but Carlene, you're already running the meeting. It should be you.
You don't mind, Sue, if you take minutes this time, and then we'll make sure we find someone else for the next meeting. How about that?
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Okay, that's what we'll do. That is incredible news. So they voted last night, and so just Liz, remind folks, this is the group that we already know, the group that did the original sketches and all of that, right?
Exactly. So they're under contract already with the CHDC to have done the, as I say, the part of the site work for the conservation restriction. So they've been out at the site. They're very familiar with the site. They've actually been working for years on the site, like even way back. But their recent contracts included the flagging of the different trees and the invasive species and some of that work for the baseline conditions report and that other environmental work. And so it was a natural piece for them to extend. They originally did not, they're very busy, like very, very busy. So they originally did not respond because they didn't even have time to put the proposal together for us. And they were not going to put the proposal together unless they were really going to be considered because of their workload. So that's like everything, pros and cons to that, right? So they are not able to start immediately. So it's in their queue for a June start, which I said, well, that was just, they come already with such background knowledge that makes it more efficient so that they'll have less sort of startup and what's the history, and they don't have any of that. And that you were going to take some time, making a kind of a short list of things you would like to see, which has to be done in order for them to be effective with their time anyway. So
Liz, is it going to be Bill Murray or is it another arm of the outfit?
No, he is the principal landscape architect there. So he'll direct the work. He's going to hire a new landscape architect. He says it's very hard to find them to assist with his other projects as well as this one. But he is the principal who, is the project contact.
I think that's great. He's been so wonderful so far. Do you agree, like with all of your years of working with him, Liz, you really like him anyway?
Yeah, he seems very knowledgeable. It's really a little outside my technical expertise. Marcia might have a little bit more perspective.
No. Yeah.
He's responsive.
He was very responsive, and he was certainly knew what he was doing in identifying the areas and identifying what could be done. So I felt very comfortable with having him as the lead on this.
So,
Places is a very well-respected firm in general, and they do a lot of local work. I think they're out of Littleton. So I think it's a good solution.
excited for that. And does anybody have any questions or thoughts about Places or the beginning of this process?
Well, I'm just curious, kind of what is the beginning? How will we kick things off with them?
Well, as soon as they're ready to start, they will come to your next meeting.
And tell us what to do. Okay.
Yep, and so you will have for them, I think, some of your ideas for the site. This is what you would like to see included. And the scope includes 2 or 3 concepts, and to work with you on those, and then to, I was gonna say shop them around, but to present the concepts to the various groups as identified. So
What
with
I
the
was
first part-
thinking, What I was
Mhm.
thinking, Liz, is that we create a sheet, and I'm happy to write that when we sort of pool our ideas today, because June is just next month, so they're going to be on board very quickly. Almost like, and like bulleted sort of the ideas that we come up with today, and then maybe
Yep.
combine that with some of the things that were on the report that you gave to us that the community came up with. Just as context. I mean, I'm sure they have all that documentation too, just to be able to give that to them all, sort of a description of what we were thinking. Does that make sense?
Yep, I mean, if you wanted to revisit some of the things from the report and pare them down, or, I mean, it's not that big a parcel, so there's only so much that you can fit in there in terms of your ideas, but yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So, so that's great. So we'll get more details, Krista, on what next steps are when they come in June, and we can orient them and they can orient us for how this relationship will move forward. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So let's talk quickly about, or not quickly, about last month's history session. I have had so many comments from people who just loved it and want to know more and contribute more. Any general thoughts about it? Anything that really struck people or that you want to mention? Bob, it's all recorded so we can share it with you. I haven't
Oh,
seen.
I've looked at that actually a couple of times, and I worked briefly with Rick Felson because the Concord Adult Ed had a Concord in the Civil War course, and he taught one of the sessions of that. A very interesting man. But one thing that I haven't heard anybody mention, and is that this site is also got an assisted living facility. That's sort of how the site came to be. And none of the things that we've talked about have include them at all that I've heard. And I'm not exactly sure how that would be. I think that it means that it has to be accessible, but I thought that was part of the plan anyway. So maybe just make sure that there's benches and stuff, things
Yeah,
like that.
right. And there's going to be a path that goes all around that facility and into the area that we're talking about, Bob, with the idea
Okay,
that people will be able to stroll around the whole site. It'll all be accessible.
right.
So I think that's the idea of how to incorporate that. What we've been talking about so far is just the history of the site and how to honor that.
Right. No, I understand. And having something that draws them into it,
Yeah.
like the history, might be helpful, because I walked a lot around Concord Park, and I think that maybe twice out of 100 some walks, I've seen people from Concord Park actually on the walking areas there. So it needs something that draws people out.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Speaking of Concord Park, there are 2 things to update us on this sort of site. One is that Nancy, Marcia, you might know her name. She used to run Concord Park. Is it Nancy Crowley?
Yes.
She's very interested, and she came to that session that we had, and she is very interested in helping in any way. And she gave me the name of a woman, and also actually David Wood also mentioned her. I haven't reached out to her yet, but I think her name is Shirley Blanke, Blanke. Marcia, do you know her? And I think she has a handle on some of the Native American history in the area. And that was one thing that we just didn't have any representation of at that history session. And so I'm not sure there is any significant Native American history at this site, but I think we need to sort of check that box and look back farther than the Civil War, which is where we sort of started in our history lesson. And so I'll reach out to her and see if she has anything to add to that. I haven't done that yet. I meant to do it by today and I didn't, and I'm sorry. And then Harry has been working on a little bit of the prison, the discussion we learned about with the prison. And Harry, you had something to mention to the group related to that.
Yeah, well, I looked into it some more since I've been interested in this subject and just read a biography of Malcolm X, and so I just decided to reach out to whoever I could to see if because it seems like we're going down this path, like we could have kind of like a plaque, people there. And so I contacted Rodnell Collins, who's Malcolm X's nephew, and he lives in the same house that Malcolm X lived in Roxbury, which is designated as a historic building. And he started a foundation, the Malcolm X and Ella Little Foundation. And so talked to him for a while, very interesting conversation. They are up, they're up for supporting what, initiative to commemorate his stay. This is more of my angle, maybe. He definitely has a very interesting perspective, but that was a critical time in Malcolm X's life when he became, well, no longer Malcolm Little. He became Malcolm X and converted to Islam, and that started when he was at the Concord Reformatory. He said that he'll support, whatever initiative we have, whatever that means. We just need to write a letter to that foundation, and they'll be like a formality if we can go ahead, pursue that, having that part of this.
And you thought support also meant financially?
I don't know. I don't think they're a wealthy foundation. They're just putting in a new park that's going up. Malcolm X Park in Roxbury is happening right around now. They're just dedicating a park. But my thoughts are more of that, to reach out to the community, and potentially there's fundraising opportunities that could come out of this, people who are interested in commemorating this.
So that's the second thing. And then, so thank you, Harry. And then the third thing is, today I was doing a trail count on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and Nat Welch came up and talked to me about a woman named Patricia Ruse. Does that name sound familiar to you, Marcia? She's a physician. Nat forwarded me this whole thread of information. And I don't know if this is in our purview or not, but I wanted to present it to you because it's the exact same location. She's trying to create an initiative to, she's a physician, is how Nat explained it. And she's trying to create some sort of initiative where she wants to lay a brick somewhere for, Marcia, if you know better than I, but for everyone, every prisoner who has died while at that prison. And so she was thinking of laying some sort of brick path somewhere along that area. And so I just learned of this today,
And I think that what I have directed her or suggested is not to do it necessarily on the space that you're creating, but to intersperse them with the rails. There are 3 sets of rails, or there were 3 sets of rails where the trail goes in front of or along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And there was a path that went off into the prison. And so using that 3rd rail at the base of the stone wall that is located along that frontage was where we were suggesting that those bricks might be installed. And that would do 2 things. It would make it more accessible to see the rails itself, it would honor those who died at the prison, and it would reduce the maintenance. Right now, all we are seeing are weeds growing up there, so it would improve the visual character of that stretch. So that was the suggestion I made, rather than trying to integrate it with Giroux Park or any place else, or take people out to the cemetery there. I don't think the state is interested in necessarily making it a feature, the existing cemetery, but this would be a way of sort of connecting all of those pieces.
Do you think this is something that we should include as part of our conversation, Marcia, or is it absolutely distinct?
No, I think it could be part of the conversation. It shows an integration of all the different layers and levels and interests in this area.
Okay. So
And there was no pun intended when you were talking about the third rail, were you? Sorry.
No pun intended. I'm the last person to get my own puns. So
Okay.
So are you saying, Marcia, that there's a cemetery on site there?
no, not on the site that this group is. There's
No, not on this site, but on the prison site?
Yeah.
the Department of Corrections has a cemetery. If you drive by on Route 2, you can see a cross in the woods, and there's a small, if a prisoner died and didn't have family, they would be placed in a grave. And many of them are unmarked, and somebody did go through and try to identify who was buried where. I don't know where that information is, but I'm aware of it peripherally, that somebody undertook that effort.
And is it public access to that?
There's no formal public access. It is, it's state land, so people could wander out there.
But it's not inside the wall?
No.
No,
Liz, you've never seen it, Liz?
No, I haven't.
If you're driving toward the Rotary from Acton, and you look to just the next time you're doing it, look to the right, sort of up a hill, and you'll see like 3 white crosses. I was always told that those were prisoners who had died of smallpox, but that must have been wrong. That must just be their cemetery up there. But Liz, you'll see those white crosses up. Now that we've told you, look up and you'll see them. You can see them this minute.
I mean, I live right there.
No.
Yeah,
It's
right.
very powerful. It's very, well, you can get it from the Bruce Freeman Trail. It's really, the first time I came across that, it was like, it's spooky.
Yeah.
Now, is
It's on
this,
the left.
North side, Liz. It's not on Com Ave. It's off, you'll
Yeah.
see it off of Route 2.
Off the rail trail, and you can see it from Route 2 as well, but you can just go, you can walk right into it from the rail trail.
now, is this a current cemetery for MCI Concord, or is this the ancient cemetery for the Reformatory with people from the 19th century who are buried there? Okay, I knew about the ancient one.
Yeah.
Got it.
I don't know
It's
what
for it's the older one, or it's still active?
I don't think it's still active.
No, I don't think
Okay.
so. I don't know where prisoners are buried who die now, but this was from way back. But I thought it was only those 3 things. Marcia's saying there are more people buried up there. So, so that's all very interesting. But that is disconnected from our charge. It's disconnected from our
Yeah.
site. But
Yeah.
okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll ask Patricia if she wants to come to a meeting and talk to us about what her initiative is.
Ask her if she has a good DOC contact too, because we've been unable to find someone to talk to about this project.
Okay.
I don't know how hard we've looked, but
You haven't asked me.
oh, I thought I had. Sorry.
I'll send you the information.
Perfect. Thank you.
And you have made the point, Marcia, that there's quite a bit of turnover in terms of the superintendent role. So maybe that's why, Liz, you're having trouble, is that I think the names switch out
No,
every
I
2
just-
years.
Jeffrey Quick is the person that I coordinated work for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail with. He is with the Department of Corrections. He is sort of provides oversight of facilities. And I'll send you his contact information.
Perfect. Thank you. Did you say Jeffrey Quick?
Quick, yes.
Yep. Great.
Jeffrey with a
Thank
J,
you.
Marcia?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So, all right, folks. So if we're moving down the agenda, now we wanted to talk a little bit about, Marcia, just as we start to think about how to interpret some of the things that we've heard about and listened to. Are there guidelines for, just to sort of, so we can wrap our mind around how we might display some of this amazing stuff that we learned? Are there guidelines for this?
We really haven't, we don't really have guidelines.
No.
I mean, I've got examples of different kinds of signs, but it's just, what is it you want to, how do you want to convey the information, and how do you want to, what do you want to include? What's the story you want to tell? And so I can show you quickly some of the different kinds of signs that we've, I mean, this is the one that exists on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. It is a typical Minuteman National Park design. It's very simple. It's the right height. When you're making the sign, you want to make sure that you are providing that ADA visual compliance, so that you can, that it's readable, that it's legible. You might want to include Braille if I think that would be a really interesting way of conveying information or demonstrating inclusivity, if you will. It could be something in the ground even. We have, let me see, there's another in West Concord. This one is explaining what is a rain garden. It's not as high up. It's lower, so it's less obtrusive, but it's a similar kind of design, and it has different information. And you know that this can open up so that you could change it out. So if you had different information, so those might be two different ways of interpreting the site. It might be, you might have a summer winter thing. You might have an annual update. I think you could set your own criteria or guidelines if you wanted.
Harry, what are you, as the visual artist of the group, what are your thoughts about, just off the cuff? I mean, this is just the start of the conversation, but what are your thoughts about those two options and what we might do?
I mean, well, I think they certainly, work. I just wonder how cost factors into this. Like, is there funding for these type of things, or is like money need to be raised?
It would be part of the grant application that we put together for the Community Preservation Committee.
Yeah.
So we'd need to cost it out and see what we would want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as from a visual designer perspective, I think, using the more specific it can be, site specific, the better. But then you get into cost issues. And I know there's also, so we have those, you're saying those are like a standard kind of design. There's also one that's like a granite, that's just a granite piece as well. And then I wonder, like we talked about the bricks, and maybe there's like a site specific installation kind of approach that's taken. And so I think that's awesome that we can apply for the grant, and we keep in mind, okay, what are we going to be communicating, and what's the best way to communicate it, whether it's a standard type of sign, or maybe signage or display, or maybe there's something that's more site specific that would be more powerful. That's also that could be get grant money for.
Forgive my, oh, go ahead, Krista.
As you say, another thing we could think about, and it kind of depends on what the character of the site ends up being. Is a kiosk similar to what we have on other conservation lands that could be at like a trailhead, maybe closer to the river where it's a little bit more natural. And that could also be, you could have a panel that opens so you could switch out information there. And that could be sort of separate from other interpretive signage.
Yep. So forgive my ignorance, Liz and Marcia, I think this is an important part of what we're going to be doing. Is this something that we as a committee that we research and sort of present, or is that something the landscape architecture firm, do we say, please show us an array of display options, and they bring that to us? How does that work?
It could go either way. What I might do is, I'm not clear on what you're looking for though, Carlene. Is it content, or is it how you display the content that you're asking?
how to display, because we're going to talk, I think we're going to have a lot of conversations about both, and we're going to talk about what the content is and also how to display it. And in my mind, there'll be interpretive panels in various, I'm thinking of 3 distinct categories. And so, but I just want to sort of start, for all of us to start thinking about, if we're going to start talking about content, I think we have to link in our head how we're going to display the content. So is it sort of like the displays that you and I went and looked at, Marcia, that day that we sort of walked at the North Bridge, and you go up on that vista and you look out and they have that nice big panel, and there's that, or there's the things you just showed to us?
Okay, just stop for a minute. And has anybody walked the Bristers Hill Walk that was installed by the Walden Woods project?
Yes.
Right near the town forest. Okay, Krista has. So I think that they've done a variety of different types of interpretation, that there are stones with words cut out, there are signs, and there are other visual cues along the way. Isn't that correct, Krista?
Yeah, and if people haven't been there, I would encourage a visit. It's really a very interesting spot, and they did a really nice job of using a lot of different types of materials. I've never worked with places before, but one thing that designers often do is kind of come with sort of an array of options, like examples from other projects that they've done. Kind of like an architect would give you like different types of wall covering choices or something like that. They would come with different kinds of this is what different types of stone that you might use in patios or pathways. And so they might have examples from other projects of signage that they've done, and different types of wayfinding markers and things like that. So
That's good to know. Maybe as an action item for the group, we can ask everyone to take if on your walks and your travels. I'm going to go see exactly what Marcia's talking about and take some photos so that we can start to develop some visuals of what other people are doing and what we might offer to the landscape architecture firm, or just have as context. Does that sound okay to everybody? Just
Yeah.
a little homework.
Sure.
Fun
Some homework, yes.
homework.
Fun
Yeah.
homework. It's go for a walk in the woods.
Fun homework. I'm just glad to know, not that I felt limited by this, but I wanted to know if we were really going, if it was important to the town that we use the same exact interpretive panels that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. But it sounds like we, as Harry's saying, we can do site specific if we want, if it fits with the ethos of what we're doing, and that's distinct and what the rail trail is doing. So it sounds like we have some freedom in that. Okay, that's wonderful. All right. So now so again, going through the agenda, the next thing that I hoped to talk about was what some of our ideas were, so that we can start to get them on paper, and we'll have something to tell. I have a puppy at my feet, so that's why I'm looking distracted, but I'm not. I'll just introduce him. Hello, King. Oh, sorry. So I can go, or I have a small list here, or if just someone else wants to start and tell us some of your ideas for what you're thinking would be useful at the site. Does anyone want to start?
I can jump in just
Okay.
so in case my battery dies. I love the history, and the fact that there's interesting history that spans so many centuries. And Carlene, I'm really glad you mentioned the Native American history again. I got as far as confirming that this was a Pawtucket area, but I haven't gotten much further than that. So I was almost imagining kind of like a historical continuum of some kind that was like delineated along a path with interpretive signage or something like that, and then also a continuum of from the river to the building of more natural to more what's the word I'm looking for? Paved.
Real, or yeah.
More designed. But kind of capturing the whole natural and cultural history of the site somehow in a walkable timeline.
Okay. Thank you, Krista. I'm sure a lot of us will have similar ideas, but I'm thrilled to hear you say that. Okay. Harry, do you want to? Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. I see your hand up.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I just was similar to what we just heard. I think organizing the displays around culture, history, and nature would, fit fairly well. We could cover Malcolm X, with culture and his writings and references to his stay, and we could cover the Civil War, pre-Civil War encampment, and our Native American past through the history. And then we've got the river and how the area has been used to talk about the environment. So just organizing ideas, that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, well, I just, what most interests me about this, and someone who works and lives nearby here, but especially works there and walks by that pretty much every day, is that how much the prison really dominates the landscape. And also how, and this isn't just a topical thing, but how race relations have, how important those are and how they have been for hundreds of years. And that is something that I feel like it hasn't really been given visibility. And that is part of this place and where we live. It's part of the census. The people who live in the prison are part of the census. People have actually moved to West Concord thinking it's a more diverse community, and it's a segregated community where some people are in the prison and some people aren't. And I don't want to come off really heavy-handed about it, but my personal interest in this is really with this, and specifically Malcolm X, who's the most prominent person there. That's an opportunity to really bring some visibility to his what he represents, which is tough stuff. I mean, it's not Martin Luther King. It's a very different perspective on race relations in America, and the prison system and the judicial system is a part of race relations in America, and it doesn't get a lot of talk. I mean, Concord's known for its authors and its history and all of that, but this is an area which I think shedding light on, it's a real opportunity to highlight that.
Harry, that's really, I'm so glad you said that. And it also reminded me when Marcia mentioned possibly putting Braille on signs, I meant to add, we should consider other languages too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great
So
idea.
a little bit of a tangent on, thank you for bringing that up, Harry. That's good.
Hey, hold on, can I, Krista, can you repeat that? I totally didn't catch what you said.
Oh, just that when Marcia meant, what Harry said reminded me that when Marcia mentioned possibly adding Braille to the signs.
Braille. Thank you. Okay,
Sounds too much like rail, I know.
exactly, yeah.
Liz?
Yes, so there's an organization called the Concord Prison Outreach. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They mostly focus on prison education for persons inside. I'm the treasurer of that organization, so it's a local 501c3. So if there's any synergies that might be achieved or anything that they might want to partner with, if you were going to explore some of that aspect, maybe there's something there.
Liz, would
That'd
you
be really
create an
helpful.
email that connects me with the head of that, and then I can invite that person to one of our meetings as well?
Sure.
Connect us, that would be great. How big is that group?
Well, so they're big in terms of their impact and their volunteer base. They have few staff. They have their headquarters is in Concord Center. They started off just servicing the Concord prisons, but now they have expanded their programming to all the DOC facilities.
Wow.
And they, because of COVID, they've kind of, changed some of their offerings. And so they're doing more on the re-entry side, but traditionally it was really just bringing volunteers into the farm and into the, you know, for all sorts of programs from gardening to budgeting and entrepreneurial book groups, you know, any of that kind of thing.
That's great. So we'll connect with them without question and then
Sure, I'm
incorporate.
glad to help. I'm very involved with them.
Oh, good. Okay. That's great. All right. Sue, I know you're taking notes, but would you like to add?
Sure. I took some notes before the meeting over time. Let's see. So earlier, Krista and possibly several other people as well talked about the idea of a path through time of the history. And I was thinking about how we could try to integrate that in other ways. I mean, so far we've only been talking about pulling in history and interpretation of history on the site. But I was also thinking about how we would affect nature on the site. For example, Commonwealth Avenue used to have huge old elm trees on either side of the roadway before they all died of Dutch elm disease, and there's no room to put back any such thing now. But one thing we could do is we could have a straight path and a lay of sorts and line it with elm trees on either side of it to point out the history that used to exist at West Concord, because it's a beautiful thing, because we don't have enough Dutch elm resistant elms in the world. At each tree, there could be a marker explaining some part of the history, or maybe that wouldn't be the way to do it, maybe between the trees. Also, people like shade, and as climate change advances, we'll need more and more of it in order to be able to deal with being in the outdoors. So gigantic elm trees would be a nice way to do that. Plus, we could say something about we're looking toward not just the past, but the future, since these poor elm trees will take 50 years before they're really impressive in size. So that was one thought that I had, and it also helps to tie together the open space site with nearby West Concord, because it's creating that direct connection to how Commonwealth Avenue used to be. We have talked about, we brought up the idea of a possible gazebo and how there should be disabled access all over the site. And so I just made myself a note that if we have a gazebo, it should be wheelchair accessible, not just to get to it, but also to get in and out of it. Let's see. My other thoughts were also not about history. I was worrying about, what do we need to do to plan about path washouts from heavy rainstorms and locating furnishings not to be in danger of climate related issues. I also had thoughts about, it's a big site. We could put in some gigantic specimen tree, like a beech tree that just spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads over 200 or 300 years. The National Park has some up at the North Bridge at the mansion, but they're beginning to die of old age, poor things. So it's a thought. We could try to do something like that. And I may or may not have mentioned before that we could also try throwing in some trees that are on the Concord Carlisle High School freshman tree project list, because I know where to find most of them in and around the high school, but why not other places too? Plus, with an open space site like this with no cars, you have far less trouble with horse chestnuts and black walnuts dropping on people's precious heads and cars. Okay, so yes, there. That's me. I hope you took notes, Carlene, because I didn't. Thanks.
I did. Excellent list. Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. Bob.
The accessibility,
Mhm.
I think, is important, but that's already been mentioned. Most of the things that I'm interested in,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a natural site, and it goes all the way to where the Neshoba Brook comes into
Mhm.
the Assabet, and having that be emphasized or accessible, that people can see it, which is hard right now, but I mean, basically the things that people have suggested are very interesting to me.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks, Bob. Marcia, did you want to mention something?
Could I mention something? I mean, I think all of these ideas are great. A gazebo doesn't have to be what we typically think of a gazebo, but I was thinking shade. The provision of shade might be with a man-made element as opposed to always having trees might be a possibility. Pollinator meadow was also an idea that had been explored for the Triangle area that is closest to the Bruce Fruman Rail Trail and the building that's being constructed. And then along that, we might have raised bed gardens where, little gardens where either someone, town residents could take care of, or residents of the assisted living facility could take care of, but they would be fragrant. They would be, might have some texture to them. They could be usable at different heights. You could add, you could invite birds to nest, roost, or whatever in different locations around the site. Might work out really well. This is a really off the wall kind of idea, but talking about a pathway, there was a bike path in Europe, and I don't remember where exactly, but they used a kind of glass along the path that would was photosensitive, so it would stay lit at night, and it would just provide you a guiding light through the path. So then you begin to say, okay, is this a place where you only want to walk during the day with daylight? Is it going to be off limits at nighttime? What other things might we think about if we were going to do something at night? Is that something you want to promote? And I don't have an answer for that specifically, but that's an area that you might want to explore.
That's great. And that reminds me, speaking of pollinator meadow, that I meant to mention that my New Hampshire cousin, the one who's all over pollinator stuff up there, mentions that there is this nationwide project having to do with monarch way stations, and you can get yourself monarch way station status, which means that all of the monarch tourist hunters would see this as an important destination for them to come visit and spend their wonderful tourist dollars at, plus, enjoy our lovely town. And we certainly wouldn't have to do that. We could have be nice to pollinators without blowing our own horn about it, but it actually seems like a nice enough idea to think about. And bat boxes, not just birdhouses. We should put up bat boxes because the mosquitoes will be fierce. And if we want to have dusk use, say, plus poor bats, they've really been getting it lately. They could use some love.
Well said, Marcia and Sue. I'll just add a couple of ideas for myself. I would love to see the same sort of interpretive panels that people are talking about. I can think of 3 different areas that have already been mentioned. One that talks about the prisons, but as Harry keeps saying, there's a whole lot to discuss with the prisons, because as we heard, and I got a lot of notes from people after our session, that just the fact that they were this incredible economic engine from the very beginning, the fact that they've been so progressive from the get-go in terms of getting people sort of into the community and teaching them the sort of learn to work reacclimation program, as well as the famous prisoner Malcolm X, but then also Anka mentioned the experiments that went on in the prison with the mushroom, the mushrooms and all of that. There's just a lot to talk about with the prisons, and And I think as Harry says, let's run to it, let's run at it and not run away from it, which, which I think is important here. There's a lot to honor and talk about and context building there. So that going on, Gary, I'm forgetting his last name, Krista, Gary, the Audubon guy.
Clayton?
Yes, Gary Clayton talking about the rip, like, so then in a panel that faces toward the river and then like gives a little bit of a history of the river up and down the river a little bit and talks about how it's wild and scenic and what that means, and then mentions the beavers and this and that I think it's a beautiful spot to really appreciate what the river is, how important the rivers are to West Concord and how important they have always been, both historically and in the present. So there's that sort of, so those are two completely separate areas. And then of course, the history of the mustering site too. And we've got lots of artifacts and lots of things that we can put on a set of interpretive panels there. So I'm imagining 3 different areas. Krista's imagining it almost like as a walk, a continuum, but I'm almost on, and which is great. Or 3 separate, distinct, like a triangulation of 3 different things is what I'm thinking. I'd also love to see a canoe landing so that people coming down the river can park their canoe or kayak and somehow make it up, not parking so that people use it as a launch point, but that along the river they can park there. I would love to see some sort of piece of public art there as a draw for people. And maybe that doesn't fit with the sort of natural landscape that we're all talking about, but I do.
Wait, when you say public art there, do you mean by the river or you mean on the site in general?
Somewhere on the site, some piece of art that incorporates the nature around it. We could do a call to artists and create something that that honors the site, something that works with nature, that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. I would also love to see some perhaps one more interpretive panel of the natural features of the site, like the sumac grove, that just like, so that maybe kids coming on a nature walk from Thoreau or Carousel could go and they would understand, like, and there could be a panel that talks about, here's a pollinator meadow and that's what it does, and on this side of the site is this sort of sumac grove, go play in it and here are the sort of birds that eat from that, or and then here are some other, what I just think that there's a lot of interesting sort of natural aspects of the site. There's also those great trunks where the beaver have eaten around and you can see it to a point, and I think as a place that kids could come walking with their teachers, there's an opportunity for sort of instruction.
That's tricky though, because those trees don't last long. So that if there's an interpretive feature, it would have to be movable.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Sorry, I'm just pulling something out of the puppy's mouth. And
Marsha's trying to slip a word in edgewise.
I'm sorry.
But I wanted to say, but some of the things you're talking about are programming. And so thinking of in terms of a programmable, what kind of places you can create that could be programmed for events to take place. It might be a poetry reading. It might be, sharing stories. It could be just a gathering, a drumming circle. So that we're talking, I think for some of the things you've identified are place oriented.
I think you're right, Marcia, and that's maybe where my mind is going, because I would love to have some natural seating area, like whether it's old granite that we get off the rail trail or old stumps or something where not like a junkyard, but something that, I'm imagining people from Minuteman Arc or Thoreau or Carousel, they could walk down there and you're right, have a reading or have an event or sit and learn something. And I really would love to see something like that rather than benches, like just regular benches, something that more integrates into the community.
I think we should do both because I think we will have all kinds of people and not everyone can trundle over to some rock hard, freezing cold granite and sit themselves down on it. And you mentioned, say, public art, Carleen, but that it should fit into the site. And there's one kind of public art that can by being very natural in some way or integrated into the plants. But on the other hand, when we are closer to the rail trail and closer to the assisted living, closer to the Giroux property, closer to the prison, or we've talked about having some sort of gazebo. Those are all built elements. And I think it would be perfectly reasonable to mount, say, well, we're beginning to get muraled out, but a non-naturalistic mural on one side of a gazebo would not be in any way out of place, I think, as long as it was cited carefully.
Yeah, just something that.
So I mean that we don't have to restrict ourselves to just one thing. We can see the site as a larger area with some places being kept one way and other places another.
That's good. And then finally, I read an article about how, I mentioned this to Krista, that birds really need places to nest. And I thought maybe we could, similar to the bat house idea, I would love to put, some place for bird species that are finding it difficult around here to find places to nest, that could add to the landscape too. Bluebird houses, or maybe in the meadow, a spot for the bobolink, which Delia introduced me to. Again, just opportunities to like sort of what you were talking about as the place for monarchs to land, Sue, a place that draws different constituencies, different groups of people, and that takes advantage of the landscape as both as something to just to go and sit and enjoy nature, but also to teach people about our natural environment. So these are
Speaking of which, let's not forget about the wonderful idea from the library of having a changeable book for people to read a page at a time. So obviously a very short book on little granite stands. I don't say that we have to do that, but I'd like to keep it on our list of possibilities. Speaking of which, that's a way to do something along that calls back to Chris's idea of having a path through history. One could even do something where on one side of a path, there are interpretive bits telling you something about the site's history that all the grown-ups are looking at. And on the other side of the path, there's the thing the library talked about with the books for little kids or something, so that little kids who are bored by the too grown-up interpretive stuff can be checking out the other side, or their parents can come with them. It can be, but mix and match for all.
Yeah, there may be a way to use QR codes so we don't try and stuff too much information onto the displays, and they can go look for a fuller picture by scanning that. And that would be a great way to link to the book idea that Sue was discussing.
Right.
Well, for little kids, QR codes wouldn't work, but for interpretive history for grown-ups, it would. Although we should certainly not carve them in granite, since they will be obsolete in 5 or 10 years, and we'll be on to the next technology.
Right. But I see all of these ideas as just, a lot of us are repeating the same things, but a lot of them have to do with this sort of idea of marshaling the rich history of the site and the sort of interesting placement of the site and sort of different parts of history, as a way to bring different types of people down there and enjoy it for different reasons. And I love that. It's such a dynamic place, isn't it? We're so lucky. We're so lucky to suddenly have this piece of property and to be able to influence how it's going to be used. Does anybody want to mention any other ideas about what might, whether that's Linda or Peter or Pam? You're welcome, Pam, to pipe up too. You're on mute, Pam, if you're trying to talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll have to say that the thing that I thought about is when I think of the prison, I think of seeing mothers with strollers coming to visit prisoners, and some of them are coming by train. So I can see them coming down the Bruce Freeman Trail now that is available, and maybe not down Commonwealth Avenue anymore, which means that there might actually be a constituent group of people who are visiting prisoners who might want to stop at a garden in that triangle area that you were talking about, putting a butterfly garden or a pollinator garden there, that might actually be. So it's not just wheelchair accessible, it's stroller accessible. And potentially you might want to target information that's there to someone who might care about the history of the prison and might be children, really young children, so it's not quite as historic that way. It struck me as a user group that that you hadn't maybe thought of there, that's even younger. It's, Concord Carousel
Yeah.
sort of age group there. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that though this is a wild and scenic river, you can't build out too much next to the river without somebody complaining. Marcia's been very good about pointing out that the buildings that were built there are screened from the river, so it doesn't mess up the wild and scenic status. But also the RSC is actually asking for people where they would like signs put up right now. That's potentially money that you could have for some of your signs. They have a sign at Pine Street and where the Pine Street Bridge, where the Bruce Freeman Trail crosses the river there near, not downriver from Pine Street, but that's one of their interpretive signs there that they have. They have the tall kind that have a little hat on them, so you kind of have to be standing up to see it. I'm not sure it's that accessible, but when you're talking about doing nature stuff along the river, and you should coordinate a wild and scenic sign in with what you're doing. And again, that there might be money for that. So I also commented, all of you keep talking about things that how you want the signs to be changeable. That was the samples that Marcia showed, the one next to the rain garden where it's under plastic and you can change it out for something else, that might be something you want to specify to your contractor, is that the signs can be changeable in what you're doing. And you talked about nighttime. It's dark at 4 o'clock for a lot of the winter time. So nighttime is really not nighttime. It's like after sports, on your way home from work, that kind of thing. So thinking about it that way is another important thing. So anyway, those were the thoughts I had.
Thank you so much, Pam. All really good thoughts. What about you, Linda?
Well, how can you top this creative list of ideas? But I did, there were two things that were mentioned that did resonate. And, Bob's reminder about taking in consideration the residents of the assisted living and finding ways to engage them, I think should not be shortchanged. I thought that was important. And then the other thing I thought of is when Marcia mentioned Jeff Quick, maybe there are other historical things that they would note that would then trigger some other ideas for this group. So otherwise, some wonderful ideas have been generated. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Can I bring up
Oh,
a last point? Which is that we've talked about all sorts of ideas. And at our last meeting, we heard not just great historical information about our site specifically, but also, for example, the pre-Civil War encampment spilled over onto the prison, what is now the prison land, the Giroux land, etc. I don't think we need necessarily to have to be all things to all people in ourselves. There are horrible problems with trying to coordinate with other groups because of regulations and turf battles and coordination and all sorts of other things. But I would love to see more coordination amongst the sites. So for example, we wouldn't have anything on our site that mentions the old Reformatory cemetery, but that when people found out about our site, it would have integrated inclusion talking about that. If I recall correctly, Marcia said at our last meeting that, or maybe it was Dave, at any rate, whoever it was, had talked to Shirley Blank, who said there isn't any specific Native American history she knows of connected to our exact site, but there's certainly plenty of Native American history around in general. And I'd like to find some way for it not to be necessary for us to include something that we don't have, but to make it possible for us to rope in people to connect with things that are nearby. Although Native American people used to make a drink out of sumac, and we have plenty of sumac on our site, but that's a mighty small connection.
I understand your point though, Sue, that we don't think of this site as sort of living in a vacuum, that it might not have a direct impact to some of these other things, but.
Well, and it's the worst point as well, that we should point to the Giroux land, but the Giroux land should point to us as
Right.
well.
Right.
And the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail should point to both of those, and we should all be pointing to each other and integrated rather than being these little tiny spot sites or narrow bands that are unrelated to each other.
Right, right. That everything is interlinked in some way, and we should honor that and acknowledge it. Okay, so that.
Actually, well, not on honor and acknowledge so much as make it useful to people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that brings us to the end of the agenda. And I have a few action items and suggestions that will come out of this meeting. But before I talk about that, is there any additional public comment? Pam, that would essentially be you. You've already spoken. Does anybody have any other thoughts or concerns or questions about anything we've talked about or anything you want to bring up? No. So here's what I'm thinking for next meeting, that and you tell me if this sounds right. I will, with Sue's help, who's been taking notes, but I have to make a list of the things that we've talked about and sort of categorize them, not by person, but by idea, because a lot of us said the same things. A bulleted list so that we can have something at our June meeting to present to the landscape architect. How does that sound to everybody? Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. I would also love to start to bring together some, just not necessarily to present at the June meeting, but I would really love for everyone to have eyes wide open about these sort of interpretive panels that you see in your travels. And I can collect those if you just want to text them to me, and I'll text you. You have my email, but I can text you my phone number or email you my phone number, and I'll collect those. And so that if we come up with some things that you see just in your travels that you really like, we could give them some, I learned this from Ann Sussman, evidence-based, ideas, so that we can pass on some ideas to them. Is everybody on board for that? Just in your travels around? I was in Burlington, Vermont last week and started doing just that. I saw some really great signs and interpretive things that I snapped a few photos of for this very reason.
Sounds great.
Okay, so we can all do that, and we could even, it could be fun. You could even actually go out and look for them. Like we've already got an assignment of forgive me, is it Bristol Woods?
Bristers.
Bristers Hill.
Brister, yeah. So there's one that we can see. And what else is there? Liz, is there any, and Marcia, anything else that we should be doing to prepare for our first meeting with the landscape architect next month?
Well, I hope that they're going to be available. They said June, I think your meeting is June 17th. Is that right? I hope that they're on board for that.
Is it?
Or
June?
you the 24th?
Yeah, I think that sounds too early to me.
Yep.
June, yeah, the last Thursday of June is June 24.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so.
Sorry, wait, didn't we change the meeting because the last, oh no, that was Memorial Day. Never mind, sorry, yeah.
That was this one.
And I will also be in touch with the DOC contact that Marcia provided and see about getting a meeting with them. And I don't know whether it would be here, but I also know that Grantham from the residential side plus the CHDC also wants to, so maybe it's either a portion of this meeting or it's a different meeting with them to sort of talk about current plans and ideas.
So that brings up a good point. So if Grantham wants to speak with us, and we've got places coming. I also wanted to see if Patricia, the woman with the bricks, and also Shirley, the woman who knows about, so is this, what should we have at this meeting, and what should we probably shouldn't clutter this meeting with too many.
So I think the Grantham would be separate.
Okay, And should the next meeting really just be our getting to know places and talking about the plan? Should we just sort of let the June meeting be that and not clutter it with other agenda items? What do you all think? Other guests and things. Marcia, you agree that it just should be our places get to know you meeting?
Well, you had a preliminary, you did get to do a site visit with Bill. So you have met him. But I think talking about the site itself and the layers that you've discussed, and he could present a little bit perhaps about what he's experienced on the site and just get an understanding of how we move forward.
Okay.
You know, would be fine. It probably would be enough. Although I would urge you to contact Shirley Blanky sooner rather than later because she is older. And so,
I will, I will do that. Okay, and so any other items, any other agenda?
You might, yeah, I just want to say that you might be able to be thinking about meeting in person coming up. I think that guidance will be forthcoming, but you know, for a project like this where you're looking at, you know, plans and stuff, it's really helpful to have that big piece of paper on the table in front of you where you can all share that to the extent that that's comfortable and feels right to the group.
Can we think about that for the June meeting, Liz? Is that possible?
I don't know that. It might be, but you might not know till shortly before. But if you're willing to be flexible and to listen to your committee and everyone's comfort level as well, it might be possible, you know, regulation wise, but is it what the group feels comfortable to do? I think you have to
Also,
consider both things.
We could check if everybody's been vaccinated. Then maybe we can be comfortable with it. I mean, maybe if everybody realizes that the other members have been vaccinated, then we're comfortable.
Yeah. Marcia, your thought?
I just want to say the governor has announced that June 15th is when the state of emergency will be lifted. And unless there is legislative action to indicate that communities, municipalities can meet remotely, then you must meet in person.
Oh, okay.
So, but some people are not as comfortable as others in meeting with person. And so we have to find a location that is public, that is accessible, and that would allow for some kind of physical distancing for those who might want to be physically distanced.
Just to add to that, Marcia, there has been legislation filed to allow Zoom type of meetings just because they've been so successful in increasing public participation.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be some hybrid solution sooner than later.
Figuring
Yes.
out the hybrid solution is the problem.
Yeah.
Could that, Marcia, be having someone pipe in on my laptop, or that's not enough? Would it have to be like a screen, like what I teach with, which covers like a big screen?
I don't know.
Is there a?
I think the guidance change is going to change daily for a little while, just because what Peter mentioned is kind of new today, I think probably.
Is there a room at Kai's Road that has the sort of larger screen that we can pipe people in on?
There is a screen. We do not have the ability right now to do what you're describing. So we'll have to see. We've got IT looking at it. We're running as fast as we can.
Okay.
I can't guarantee that we will have it by June 17.
So if we are
24th.
compelled, so I want to hear from the group, if we are compelled to meet, you know, because June 24 is after June 17, can we, what room, if we're thinking about meeting in person, just so we can talk about it here, what room, should it be the conference room in 141 Kai's, or maybe the one in church, the church building, or I'm pointing to it because it's right down the street. What are you all thinking? And Liz and Marcia, what are you thinking? Where might we meet? Where might
I think that the scheduling of rooms, like, I mean, who knows what meetings on which nights and the conflicts, I think that we have to discover that. I have a key to the church building, the Church Street building. So that's, I can always, the CHDC used to meet there. So I could open it up and lock it for there, and that, that kind of thing is easy. But I think it's a lot of the scheduling of what other committees are meeting on that day and what have you.
As a West Concord related committee, it seems, and so many of us in West Concord, it seems sensible to have it be
Right
in
here.
West Concord. But I don't own a laptop. How will I take minutes using my fun keyboard?
You can use my laptop.
I cannot type on any keyboard but this one.
All right.
Yeah. So I'll be back to taking minutes by hand. Oh, God.
But,
There were-
so, and Liz and the rest of us, Peter, I don't know where you are, and Linda, I don't know where you are, but I know everyone else is in West Concord, but Marcia, that would mean you schlepping across town to come to the church building. Is
On
that
my way home.
okay? So I think that's a good solution if we can nab that
Works for
room.
me.
I'm gonna book, Liz, I think we should go and we should book that room right off the bat, and I can do it, or you can do it. And then we'll figure out the logistics of how to pipe people in. How does that sound to everybody?
Well, certainly go
Sounds
ahead
good.
and try to book it, and then
I
we'll
think we should
take
book
it from there.
We'll book it for the rest, through, because, and then we'll work from there. Because everyone's gonna start booking things if this is all changing. Marcia, what's that room called? What's that? Is that just the conference room where we always meet at first floor?
The thing is, that room is now the assistant town manager's office. That is not a conference room. The conference room is now in the basement there. So they've, right now, the townhouse is under renovation. So they've relocated everybody from the townhouse. They're dispersed across all the different town buildings. They're at Knox Trail, they're at Church Street, they're at Harvey Wheeler, and they will not be going back until June.
Okay. Is
So-
that
So we could,
basement?
we could
Until
also,
this June?
This June.
So even if we had to meet somewhere terribly inconvenient in June, after that, we would have the,
I don't know if they're going to renovate the space and put it
yeah, I
back.
don't know. I mean.
I don't know how they're going to reallocate.
We
the
could,
space.
we could meet at Knox Trail. That's also a place that doesn't really get scheduled through the main town process.
I didn't know we had meeting space at Knox Trail, huh?
Wouldn't be
Yeah,
able
it's
to.
just the conference room in the RHSO office.
You won't be able to. It's not accessible.
How about the
Okay.
the downstairs at the library in West Concord?
Yep, we could also do that.
Mhm.
Is the basement of the church building accessible?
Church Street building, yes, there is an elevator in that building.
Okay,
55 Church.
all right. I'm gonna try for that, the basement in that building, and then if that doesn't work, we'll try for the room at Harvey Wheeler, and if that doesn't work, we'll try for the Fowler Library.
Very good. You've
All right.
got 3 options. That sounds good.
Yeah, all close by. Okay, does anybody else have anything else to mention or bring up? No? Okay, so it's 6:14. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Who motions and who seconds?
Second,
Bob seconds. I in favor. Aye, Sue?
Aye.
Bob?
aye.
Harry?
I
And I think that's everyone, because I think Krista got knocked off. So then we're officially adjourned 6:14. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful meeting. We'll see you.
thank you, everyone.